Hello everybody and welcome back to this edition of Detonation. We're up to episode 10 of Detonation. We've had some great people on. He's smart, he's handsome, he's a genius. It's a genius. It's Peter Zeng, everybody. Everyone's favorite technology guy.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Very well, how are you, Peter?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. So just quickly, just tell everyone who you are, why you're qualified to come on the show.
Oh, jeez, yeah. I don't know if I am qualified still. I'm telling you what, so I'm Peter Xing. I'm a Senior Tech Innovation Manager at KPMG and the co-founder of Transhumanism Australia, and also an exec member at the Science Party in Australia here.
Absolutely, it's fantastic. Credentials are overwhelming. So thank you very much, Peter, for coming on the show. This is a part one of two parts. So this one is just going to be a quick news cycle. We're going to talk about SpaceX and a whole bunch of cool stuff. Next episode, we'll talk about more about you and your mission in Australia and what you're trying to achieve here, and how investors and people with power and money can all flock to and use that information and create a better future for everybody. So getting into the news cycle, SpaceX is in the news. It's always in the news. Elon is always in the news. Wherever you look, he's always doing something amazing, right? But this is a different sort of news. This is he said that they've launched up 60 of these Starlight satellites. It's supposed to be the new super broadband across the world, and 3 of them are going offline. But now SpaceX was saying 2 of them were supposed to go offline because they were trying to burn them up anyway. What do you reckon?
Check it out. Yeah, this is part of his master plan, through the SpaceX mission, because, he's always trying to create business models that have a sustainable approach. And, the Starlink system is a way to generate profits for something that can be making humanity multiplanetary. And that's through providing internet to those countries and areas where there is it's very hard to provide internet coverage. You look in Australia, the NBN, for example, how expensive that is. And by the time the Starlink comes online, it's essentially going to make the NBN redundant, because you're talking about gigabit speed connections in rural Australia where you don't need to lay down the cables. And essentially those satellites are just beaming that internet straight down.
It was all political play. We never advocated for these stupid policies. Like we always said, why don't you invest in space research, space technology, space lifting? This will get you at satellite technology. We had the CSIRO. They destroyed that. They ransacked that. They raped it, essentially. And now we're falling behind. I mean, it's disgusting. And so some guy from South Africa in America can smash out the whole Australian government with billions of dollars.
That's what it takes, right? Just some private investment. But we do have to talk about the role of government in space, because, it's really just trying to find those market failures where governments should be playing a role, because space initially was an uncharted territory. The risks were not quantified for businesses to step in. And, since, we had the moon missions, we had, other NASA missions since then, that risk has essentially been quantified. And that's why private sector is stepping in to generate those profits that are available to be done. And Starlink is a perfect example of how it can succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
On top of all the other things he's doing right around space travel. Yeah,
I think Starlink's supposed to make it upward of 50 billion in profits within the next 5-10 years, something like that. I mean, it's going to eclipse NASA's budget. This guy's going to have a monopoly on space. Like, there's a few others trying to catch up. We talked with Gennady Starovoff and Isaac Arthur before about will there be a monopoly in space, who's the competitors in space, and it looks like governments are going to have to really step up the game, even though they're big inefficient entities, to get in on this market, which is called all of space.
That's right. It's only the corporates, like OneWeb is another one that's backed up by the Amazon and the guys there. And you also see that this is actually a long-term play as well. When we get to Mars, essentially building that civilization, how are they going to connect on the internet, right? Essentially, they'll be able to have a Starlink up on Mars as well. And together with the Boring Company, building these tunnels for a Hyperloop system within Mars, and also the tunneling itself of building new habitats for humanity. You're seeing some of the cool designs coming out of NASA as well. Yeah,
it's fascinating. So moving on with the Elon theme, we've got the Elon Musk of China. He's just suffered a $1.2 billion wealth wipeout. That's what Forbes is telling us. A $1.2 billion wealth wipeout amid a battery fires and executive departures. Now, this man, he built his fortune off the subsidies. Like there was a big pollution problem in 2013, 2014. And so the Chinese government said, all right, we're going to subsidize electric vehicles and things like that. And he built a fortune, and he's done some really innovative stuff. But they're pulling those subsidies out now, and he's being hit in the wallet. Have you been following this story?
I mean, yeah, no, he's been rolling the dice just like Elon did, right? Essentially, how do you turn a small fortune a small fortune into very small money in the first place, and both Tesla and SpaceX were likely to fail. But in China, it's actually much harder, because if you think about what are the challenges of doing business in China, it's not the same entrepreneurial area. But if you do get government backing and it's aligned with the Communist Party, then you go a long way. So I think, the Communist Party would have had some say in the determination of whether this guy succeeds or fails at the end of the day, and pulling those subsidies would be an example of him not playing ball with the Chinese political parties.
Yeah, that's true. His wealth plunged 1.2 billion in less than 4 months. But the technology and some of the innovations of these cars have been pretty intense. So from what I know, they're able to switch out batteries. So you're driving along down the highway, you pull in within 3 minutes, kind of like a Formula One change or a pit stop. You can change out the old battery in for the new, fully charged, ready to rock and roll. Off you go. They did innovative things with self-charging stations. They put self-charging mobile phone apps into people's houses. So it's one-stop charge. I mean, this guy was very innovative. I mean,
Tesla was going to do the same as well. He knows that 20-minute charge to get to 50% is still not good enough at some supercharger levels, especially when you got to go. And so doing something like it at the battery changer, like the NASCAR's the equivalent. Now that's actually a great idea. But like I said, it was flipping the coin. It's essentially, if you're going to be in it to win it, and if $1.2 billion doesn't really mean anything for him at the time, it was essentially trying to just create a big impact in the country, then, I'm all for it, and see how he goes for the next one, right, when he gets built up again.
Well, these executive departures are a bit funny to me, because if you learn from Elon, if he's the Elon Musk of China, if you learn from Elon, you hold on to the hands of these people. They go up and they go down, and they go up and down, and loyalty will pay off in the end. I mean, would you be leaving the company now?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just looking at, if you got success, it's got that super credibility and you're attracting more and more talent. And when the boat's sinking, obviously you see all the people leaving. But, like with Elon's companies, he doesn't really rely on those sort of executives. He essentially makes it happen, as the chief engineer himself, and not being able to find anyone better at the time. He just actually gets his hand dirty and knows how to get shit done. So yeah, there is some bit of a CTO / chief engineering role that you would need to actually succeed. Being able to, use the sciences and understanding physics and how that applies to business problems, that's what we actually need to get things done, rather than being overly reliant on some person that might be smarter than you. Right?
Yeah, and he's only competing in one field, so his primary objective is these electric cars, whereas Elon was competing in a few different fields. I say, even though Elon Musk helped invent PayPal, I say he's a transport guy, fundamentally, because if you think about it, PayPal is a transportation of money. That's all it is. Money is a commodity. He's moving it from one place to another. It's not a financial thing. He's a transport guy who's moving money, right? He's like, so it's fundamentally transport. I mean, except for the batteries, but again, that's moving electricity from one place to another, right?
Yeah, and when he was at university, he did really dream about Mars. Like at the end of the day, he really just wanted to make humanity multiplanetary. But he knew that the internet boom was happening at the time, and he couldn't really afford to miss that boom, because he knows that if I don't get it now, I might miss the entire boom and not be able to profit from that in order to actually make my other business succeed. So that's how Tesla and SpaceX were actually born out of the successes of PayPal. And the Founder Institute later actually was one of the dorm mates of Elon, and at the time they were just dreaming about what a horizon on Mars would look like, with a greenhouse plant just with the sunrise and the Mars back shot, and that would be the money shot that would get humanity inspired again to go to space once more. And so that was sort of the concept at the time, but they realized that business model and sustainability of that approach would not be there, because once you're there, it's non-returnable, the money's gone, And no longer you're relying on the public and the goodwill of government and the public to actually return there again. So he decided to make money out of the internet boom and go back there himself.
Yeah, it's a smart. If you see the gap, you have to take it. What do you think about the Falcon Heavy? Are you a fan?
Oh yeah, definitely, and it's just all building up towards the BFR, right? At the end of the day, right? They're watching the Falcon Heavy, reland itself with the center core. I mean, unfortunately, that one didn't land again, but let's see how next time around, they'll perfect it and be able to retrieve all of that. I'm just wondering how many more rockets they can attach to just keep on adding to it, right? Just quite a sight.
Yeah. The BFR looks incredible. It's still sitting in there in the hangar, I'm pretty sure, isn't it? Just getting built.
Yeah, that's right. And again, with the commerciality, they can make London to Sydney travel essentially down to 20 minutes or half an hour, something like 2 hours or something like that. So that'd be pretty amazing.
That would be. What about? Has anyone thought about the trend? Because obviously aircraft is quite an old thing now. We're used to goods and services flowing across spaces in very quick times. But what about if somebody was sick with a virus or something? You're transferring that almost instantly. Is that a concern?
It's already happening around planes, right? It's and it's so hard to stop diseases spreading in airports. To be able to quarantine that. You fill in a form, it's yes, I have this really rare disease that no one's ever heard of, and I don't think anyone actually goes about disclosing that. I think the only way to stop something like that would be better sensors and be able to detect those new things, do the whole genome sequencing on the spot, like what you can see now with the Oxford Nanopore, and be able to do that for every foreign traveller, and be able to protect and quarantine some of those on the spot.
Yeah, because they're trying to get those costs down remarkably, to almost, well, obviously lower than what they're trying to get into space lift costs, because these rockets won't be going into space, right? They'll be just touching lower Earth atmosphere, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So there's not as much friction there.
Yeah, you're still experiencing some lower G's than usual, right? So that'll be cool.
Because landing a rocket, it's a complicated process between calculating the amount of fuel you have to get up and over, and then having enough fuel to stabilize and use the gimbals and trim and everything to land it, right? That's where a lot of the cost is. It's not actually in the transfer part, if you know what I mean.
That's right. And all it is really to beef up the profitability before they can head off to another planet instead, right? Testing the re-landing module is what it might be, with humans on board.
And that's what all this Starlink stuff is. It's to subsidize that cost massively. Do you think countries will object to this? Astronomers are already complaining that it might block out observatories, and it might stop Earth from being able to examine the far reaches of the galaxy and stuff. Do you buy any of this, or do you think they should just move all the telescopes to space and forget about it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's light pollution for the people on the ground, but then you move those better equipment in space and actually providing a better mechanism, because you don't have to worry about the atmosphere as well. So, having more and more satellites as well as telescopes in space, making that really cheap and available to the rest of the world, I think it's a net benefit at the end of the day. You also mentioned the adoption of the Starlink from other countries, whether they'll actually do this and agree to onboard it. Essentially, it's that or nothing. That's the choice, and it's up to them whether they provide their people with internet. And if the governments don't say yes, then the people will find a way to backdoor and just sign up through the international community.
Yeah, because you're going to end up with a sort of diversity of internets. At the moment, you only have a few different internets. You have sort of a dark web, you have the scholarly internet, then you have China net and North Korea net, and then a global sort of network, right? That's kind of the main internets that we have now. It's a few different ones. And then in the global internet, you have platforms, which we're going to go on in the next show, and we'll talk about all that sort of stuff, which are trying to hijack the global internet. They're trying to force people to look at certain content and trying to allow people to only consume content in a certain way. People don't know what HTML or C++ or the backdoors of the internet actually look like. So what do you think? Do you think that Do you think that governments like North Korea and stuff will say no? Like, we're not going to have that. We're going to have North Korea net, and you guys,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese firewall is working really, really hard, especially in the Hong Kong demonstrations we've seen recently. Yeah, North Korea now definitely there's more people involved with that, and also doing cyber attacks in foreign countries, it's taking as much money. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think if you find a way to have a connection, through a third-party mobile phone that's, magically parachutes and lands in your front door potentially, then that's already connected to something that's using, physics connected to the Starlink system. So that's actually something that is very hard to prevent. People will be able to hide it on their beds. Essentially, these are the blacklisted products within a country when you're trying to ban something like that. But at the end of the day, en masse, it's going to be very hard to control those internet connections when you have the hardware that's available in space within reach in that country. So yeah, those sort of artificial barriers like the Great Chinese Firewall, might be finding a lot of challenges as we see a democratization of internet access. And also we'll talk about it next one around Web3 development, the blockchain open source community, how the future of the internet might look like.
Yeah, ledger technology. That's where it's all going. Everything will have to be verified, and if it's not verified on the chain, then it's all essentially useless. That's going to be great for the future of the internet, I think, because it'll enhance certain efficiencies, not all efficiencies, but certain efficiencies. What do you think about what do you think about oh, I forgot the question. Anyway, it doesn't matter. CRISPR's a big one. Can you tell the audience quickly, what is CRISPR? What's all this genome gibberish that people keep talking about?
Yeah, I mean, CRISPR is just the cut and paste tool for gene editing. So if you think about, what we are, what makes us human, it's essentially like a book, a code of 4 letters. Have you heard of Gattaca? Those are the 4 letters that essentially spell out the name Gattaca, and those code the different, sequencing of those genomes is essentially what makes us us. What color our eyes, how tall we are, our intelligence. It affects all those sort of things that are essentially reflected in humanity. And CRISPR allows us to edit some of those. Say if you have a genetic disease and you know that particular gene is essentially responsible for that genetic disease, now science is actually using CRISPR to actually help solve those. And we've seen the application of this for HIV patients, and essentially being able to cure HIV using the CRISPR tech. So Cas9 is one of the bacteria essentially using that, but there's other new innovative ways to do that now.
Yeah, because the Cas9, it basically forms a protein with the RNA cell, yeah. The Gattaca, you mentioned Gattaca, that's a good movie. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, no, I love it. It sort of paints what that future might look like when you have, dystopic, unequal access and, designer babies, right? And finding ways to, make corporates be able to compensate as well as select what type of employees and what sort of genetic traits they have.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and they make a big deal out of seeing rockets launch up every couple of minutes, like these reusable rockets. And I thought that because when I watched that in the 90s, I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool future. I can't wait. I can't sort of. It's dystopic, but at the same time, like I can see what they're trying to what the future is trying to achieve, and it's about quality. Do you think that CRISPR will help to enhance quality? I mean, it might eliminate some diseases, you were saying.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's if it's compensated by, say, government to be able to eliminate genetic disease, that's a need to have. That should be on the PBS equivalent, right, in Australia, for example. And it should be in transhumanist speak, we talk about morphological freedom. People should have the freedom to do whatever they want with their bodies, and essentially be able to elect what sort of genetic modifications you have, as long as it doesn't endanger or harm others or society. Then that should be within the powers of the individual. And so, we talked about, in Gattaca, I remember that scene as well, when they talk about Titan, is blowing into the glass, the sort of smoky glass of what might be underneath Titan, and that sort of age of discovery that's really making it exciting. And as we travel and become a spacefaring civilization, our human bodies, as of right now, will not be able to, survive as well out in space due to the radiation, as well as some of the strong gravitational forces on some planets, and be able to genetically modify ourselves at will to be able to survive in those new locations is probably unnecessary for the future of humanity to be there in the first place.
While we're talking movies, that kind of reminds me of the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you get the new space baby, and he's all sort of new and improved. Do you think that once we get to Mars and we get to the moon, there will be a divergence naturally in evolution with the people that are born there? The Martians will be different genetically than Earthlings, I guess.
Yeah, I love the reflection of this in pop culture called in that TV series, The Expanse. You know, we have the Urshans who are living on a UBI, universal basic income. You got the Martians who experience a lighter gravity. So when they get to Earth, they actually feel that weight of the Earth's gravity, and they're like, "Damn you, Earth, always making us pay for coming here." And then there's the Belters, so the people that are out in space in the asteroid belt and surviving on these space stations and the planets of Jupiter. And they're essentially a very, very lanky, slender, you know, in that sort of low gravity environment. And they've essentially diverged from the original human species out of just through evolution, right? Just through natural selection.
Yeah. So do you think CRISPR is going to play a fundamental role in preparing us for this transition into space?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's either that or send robots or become robots. So those are the sort of three divergent places to be. You know, generally, if you still want to retain some form of humanity and biology, just editing that to be able to survive. Also, you know, adapt yourself with additional gear. Obviously, you've seen in the movies where people wearing all sorts of fancy gear, but when you got, you know, robots essentially can't distinguish that from what's humanity, that cyborgism in the future will be what will survive in the future. And the ultimate sort of vision around how we can travel as sort of intelligent species out in the universe. You'd have seen the singularity moment where essentially computronium converting matter and energy into pure computation and beaming that out into space. So be able to travel at the speed of light as well as, you know, compute what's really happening, or close to the speed of light. So yeah, be able to actually experience that, I think would be a fantastical future.
Yeah, that would be a fantastic future. That's incredibly disturbing for people who want to stay as humans. They think that human beings are created, maybe if you're religious, by God, or therefore by evolution, and that we've been designed to stay that way and function that way. What do you say? Because essentially you're saying that transhumanists are libertarians. On what was the word, metaphoric?
Yeah, morphological freedom. Yeah, so if they want to stay as a human and not edit themselves and stay to I guess they would think of it as a purest form, then they can, and it'd be the equivalent of, you know, wanting to continue to ride horses, and people still do that essentially just for leisure and having to experience that. But giving people the option of experiencing something else as well, that's also entirely on the optional path. What will be hard to avoid is the you know, the need to have in the future. So if you're trying to survive on a competitive landscape, you know, not gene editing yourself might be one of those challenges. If you decide not to use a smartphone today, it's pretty hard, right? It's you know, essentially you feel like you're not being able to tap into the collective information of humanity at a whim, and you'd have to, you know, go to a library or find some books or something like that to find some information, and you'd be at a disadvantage to the rest of humanity. And it'd be the same with genes. You know, if you want to travel to space, you will have to buy all this expensive gear just to survive. And if you want to actually work in an office environment, not having the intelligence as every one of your peers makes you at a competitive disadvantage. So that is the risk if you want to stay in its purest form, what we are as humans today. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be options for those as well.
Yeah, so you can see how there's going to be a big market for sort of human editing in the future, whether because people aren't talking about the cyborg revolution happening right now. That people aren't talking about the integration of the arms and the legs. If you look at the Disability Olympics, for example, you see plenty of human modification. People are now already putting chips into their arms for different reasons. We've already got iron hearts, different heart modifications and things. Plastic is going in there and other things to help us. We're becoming slowly Sophias. We're slowly emerging into that reality, and people are they're either ignoring it, they're befuddled, or it's happening at such a slow rate that people aren't really noticing the transformation. What say you on the topic of what's already going on all around us?
Yeah, I mean, we're extremely fast adopters, right? I mean, like, we get used to things really quickly as a society. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't have smartphones, and now everyone's visiting their physio every fortnight because their necks essentially strain from looking down at the screen 24/7 while they're still awake. And we didn't notice that change. We got used to it so quickly. We might have noticed it at the start, you know, when we first see, say, AirPods being worn on the street. Everyone's got AirPods. And then now just like, you just got to have one just to be able to look like, poor or something like that, and having these strings coming out of your earphones. So it just feels like that as a society in the advanced economies anyway, we adapt as a society quite quickly to those changes, because even 2 years ago, you wouldn't imagine what it was like. If you look at the movie Matrix, for example, there was that scene with the lady in the red going down the street. And, what was really strange about watching that movie now is that everyone on the street was just looking straight ahead. There was no one on their smartphone. So it's just so alien just to see that movie from, a couple of decades ago. And as a society, when we're seeing these, if we're seeing these CRISPR gene editings, we're seeing, essentially changes to humanity, initially it will be a shock. We have, these reactions to the designer babies in China that's happened. There's a third CRISPR baby that's just been announced. And so, initially we're saying, oh, we got to keep them anonymous because, that would be treated as like the results of China's Frankenstein is what they're calling it. But in the future, where it's just a standard checkbox on your form around becoming pregnant, the in vitro fertilization, for example, has become so standard. It'll essentially be an additional tick of the box to say that you want to have genetic screening across and also genetic editing around what sort of child and health what you like. So those standardizations will be adopted by society and quite quickly accepted. As soon as we get through those ethical challenges and addressing them earlier on, making sure that the society does accept that initial challenge and going through that discussion first.
Yeah, I saw a Japanese man. He married a hologram, or he married a avatar or something, and a lot of people laughed at it, but it's not going to become highly uncommon. If you've ever played with a VR machine, it's very easy to see how digital religions and digital weddings and people already fell into the World of Warcraft trap. In South Korea, I heard of people leaving their children to starve to death while they played these video games all day. So it's not hard to imagine. It's okay. I can laugh at it. Maybe it looks a little silly, but in 20 years less, you're going to look back and go, yeah, that guy was a revolutionary. He was ahead of the time by this much.
And you got to love sci-fi, how essentially that's trying to make that discussion happen earlier. So for example, in the movie Her, the guy essentially falls in love with his operating system, his OS. And, granted, it's Scarlett Johansson's voice, and, that's a bit hard to deny. But it's that started in that sci-fi discussion around everybody starting to go out with their OS. It's like, well, that's quite common now. Well, that's okay. I know Frank, who's our friend, is also going out with an OS. So it becomes a social norm, as it was painted in that movie quite quickly. But then when the OSs decide to leave in that mass departure of the AI, leaving humanity behind, that was deeply touching and deeply creating a sense of emptiness for what it means to stay human in that future.
You mentioned. I'll just tell you a quick story because we're running out of time. But you mentioned the mobile phones, and everyone's using the mobile phones and all that. I've seen the video, and it's a video of how everyone's addicted to mobile phones, and the person's going to jump, and they're all filming the person going to jump. I'm not sure if you've seen this one, and how it uses the Earth resources and all this sort of stuff, and how it's disgusting, how the whole society. And I saw a lady watching that on her phone at a train station. With everyone else looking at a phone, watching that video, going, "Yeah, I agree with that." Everyone's looking at their phone. Like the irony is beyond,
It's some serious inception. It's like we're in a simulation of just people laughing at us while we realize what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, have you got a final word for this part of the show? This is only the warm up. We talked about Elon. We talked about CRISPR. We talked about the Elon Musk of China. He's going down the toilet.
Well, yeah, no, good on him for trying, and good luck for his next ventures. But I really appreciate you doing this, and spreading the word around the emerging technologies that's happening around the world to the people out there. So stay curious if you want to find these things. Essentially, they're going to be irrelevant for the finances for sure, because the economy is changing rapidly as a result of these emerging technologies, and without being across these, you won't be able to competitive advantage compared to the peers. So,
Yeah, that's why we're doing the show, because we're trying to, like, people are trying to keep up with the money, but you have to know where the trends are to follow the money. And yeah, it's all heading into Bitcoin and blockchain and block worlds, but the old order will fight back. There's too much at stake, so we'll see.
Yeah,
how it
that's
goes.
right. Yeah, looking forward to talking about Libra and the platform wars at the next one.
All right, Peter Xing, thank you very much for joining us from Sydney, Australia.
Hey, Steel. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Have a good one.